Welcome in, basketball fans, to another edition of NBA Now from Chat Sports. With you as always, I'm Jimmy Crowther, breaking down all the latest news and rumors around the league. And today, we're going around the Eastern Conference, and I'm telling you the top free agents for each team in the East. And we're starting with the Atlanta Hawks. Obviously missed the playoffs, sitting in the lottery. Three main guys that they're going to be looking at in free agency, or that they might lose to free agency, are Vince Carter, Dwayne Dedmon, and Justin Anderson. Justin Anderson, obviously a restricted free agent. And really the only intrigue in Atlanta is with Vince Carter, who announced that he's coming back for his 22nd season. Now, as NBA fans, I think we're all hoping that he goes to a playoff contender, and I don't think the Atlanta Hawks are that quite yet. And then you look at Dwayne Dedmon. He's a stretch five who could be a good player for a playoff team. Don't see him going back to Atlanta at 29 years old. And now look, Atlanta has a lot of cap space. I think they're going to be players for some of the big names, but I don't expect them to be in the running for anyone major. Now we're going to Boston. Top free agents there. This is going to be a wild summer for the Boston Celtics. You got Kyrie Irving, who has a $21 million player option. Al Horford also has a player option at $30 million. And then Terry Rozier is a restricted free agent as well. They also have guys like Marcus Morris that will be entering free agency. And there is no doubt in my mind that Boston is going to try to bring back all three of these guys. I think Horford will opt into his player option. We obviously expect Kyrie to opt out and look elsewhere. But Boston's going to do all they can to bring these guys back. Now we look at Kyrie Irving. He's going to make this summer a dramatic one. He always does. And in my opinion, if the Celtics get knocked out by the Milwaukee Bucks in the second round, I think Kyrie's gone. Honestly, it's going to take a lot for him to stay. Obviously, he's intrigued by New York, possibly even the Los Angeles Lakers. And if Kyrie walks, I think the Celtics are going to start to prioritize bringing back Terry Rozier, possibly even overpay for him as a restricted free agent. And then you still have this core of Rozier, Jaylen Brown, Gordon Hayward, Jason Tatum, Al Horford. That's still a solid five, and it keeps you competitive out in the East. But Boston could have a pretty wild summer. Now next up, the Brooklyn Nets. Main guy here, D'Angelo Russell, who had an all-star season. He's a restricted free agent, and they also have Ed Davis, DeMarre Carroll entering free agency as well. Now, the number one priority for Brooklyn has to be bringing back D'Angelo Russell. He brought him back to the playoffs. He had an incredible season. I'm really high on what I saw from D'Angelo Russell. Obviously, he just had that marijuana incident in the airport, whatever that deal was. That was dumb. But he still should be a priority for them. Should even overpay, probably max him out as a restricted free agent. But outside of bringing back D'Angelo Russell, they really feel like they're going to be in the running for guys like KD and Kyrie Irving. And KD and Kyrie said they're probably they didn't say this, but the thought is that they're going to seriously consider the Brooklyn Nets this offseason. And I'd love to see it. I'd love to see the Brooklyn Nets get one of these main guys. I just don't know if it's going to actually happen. Like I said, we're going rapid fire. So now we're looking at the Charlotte Hornets. Missed the playoffs once again. Their main guy, their best player, Kemba Walker, is entering unrestricted free agency. Now, if he makes an All-NBA team, any of the All-NBA teams, he's eligible for the Supermax, and I wouldn't be surprised to see Charlotte offer that up because he's been their star for so long. And then they also have Jeremy Lamb entering free agency, and Michael Kidd-Gilchrist has a player option in Charlotte. Now, you look at Kemba and you look at Jeremy Lamb, that's their top two scorers by a pretty wide margin, both Lamb and Kemba Walker. So they're going to do all they can to bring both back, but I have a feeling we're going to see Kemba Walker leave in free agency. But he's in the prime of his career, and teams are going to be chasing him all summer long. There's been three really hot teams that have been kind of on his tail lately, from what we've heard in reports, and that's the Dallas Mavericks, obviously, the Los Angeles Lakers, and the New York Knicks. I personally think the Knicks and the Lakers are going to prioritize guys above him, but I wouldn't be surprised to see the Dallas Mavericks make him their number one priority this summer. And look, if Kemba's gone, if Kemba leaves, there are some really, really dark days ahead in Charlotte. They need to rebuild through the draft if Kemba Walker leaves. Just start to build around. Right now, their best young players are Miles Bridges and Malik Monk, and if they bring back Jeremy Lamb, that's also a nice young piece. But it might be time, if Kemba walks, to enter tank mode in Charlotte. But let me know what you think in the comment section below. Tell me where you think Kemba Walker will be playing next season. If you think it's Charlotte, if you think it's Dallas, New York, LA, maybe a wild card team in there. Throw me some options. Tell me where you think Kemba Walker is going to land this summer in free agency. And now we look at the Chicago Bulls. Now, the Bulls don't really have anybody that's entering free agency that's a major name. You look at Robin Lopez, Wayne Selden's a restricted free agent, and Ryan Arcidiacono, who had a pretty nice season, is a restricted free agent as well. Really, the only interesting thing that's going to happen in Chicago this summer is the NBA draft and where they fall in the lottery. They have a 12.5% chance at Zion Williamson and the number 1 pick. And they're going to try to build around this young core of Zach LaVine, Lauri Markkanen, and Wendell Carter Jr. And then, even Chris Dunn is kind of a nice piece over there, but I think they'd rather have a guy like John Morant or Zion in Chicago. I don't expect them to be a big player in free agency, and I don't really think they're going to try to bring back Robin Lopez, if we're honest. So another lottery-bound team, the Cleveland Cavaliers. This is another team that really doesn't have anybody major going into free agency. David Nwaba is entering restricted free agency. Sauce Castillo, Nick Stauskas is entering unrestricted free agency. And then Marquise Chris, who they acquired during the trade deadline, is also entering free agency. Nobody really to prioritize there. This is another team. They have a 14% chance of the number 1 pick, obviously tied for the first best odds in the lottery. Colin Sexton's there. Kevin Love is there. Cedi Osman's having a pretty nice career. But other than that, Cleveland's not going to be really interested in free agency. It's all about the draft for them. Plus, I don't think anybody's going to really be looking at Cleveland as a number 1 option in free agency, if we're being honest. So now, the Detroit Pistons. These guys, they have 2 stars in Andre Drummond and Blake Griffin, but they just can't get any real talent around them. They picked up Thon Maker, who had a pretty nice playoffs and kind of nice season afterward as well. You got Reggie Jackson there. That's really about it. They're free agents this summer. Wayne Ellington, Glenn Robinson III, Ish Smith. Wayne Ellington was acquired at the trade deadline. He had, some nice moments for them as a veteran. Not sure if they look to bring him back. But they also have guys like Jose Calderon and Zaza Pachulia, 2 veterans that are also entering free agency this summer. But really this summer is all about putting some talent around Griffin and Drummond, because there's really not anything to build on in Detroit. So the summer's going to be an interesting one for them. They really need to get some talent around those big guys, some shooters, maybe even a real point guard outside of Reggie Jackson. It's going to be a pretty interesting summer in Detroit. Do you waste more years of Blake Griffin, or do you finally get some talent around him? And then Indiana. Now, this is a team that I think could be a big player in free agency. They have a lot of change that could happen. You look at Bojan Bogdanovic, arguably their second best player on the team, Tyreek Evans and Thaddeus Young, all entering unrestricted free agency. Another guy that I don't have on this list is their starting point guard, Darren Collison. It's going to be a really interesting summer for the Pacers. They obviously got swept by the Boston Celtics in the first round, and that is because they didn't have their star player, Victor Oladipo. Obviously went down with an injury after just 36 games, I believe it was. And, Tyreek Evans, who's, like I mentioned, he's one of their unrestricted free agents, stepped up and had a pretty nice season for him to fill in for Oladipo. And then also Darren Collison was also in that starting 5. So that's, without Oladipo, that's 4 of their starting 5 players entering free agency in Indiana. So, in my opinion, I think they overpay a little bit here, and they bring back almost all these guys. Maybe they let Collison walk, maybe they let Thaddeus Young walk, but they try to bring back this same core of Oladipo, Bogdanovic, Sabonis, Miles Turner, and try to get back into the playoffs with a healthy Victor Oladipo at the helm of everything. And I really think they could get back into the Eastern Conference playoffs next season and possibly even a top 4 seed. But speaking of the NBA playoffs, are you looking to make some money during these playoff series? Well, use our favorite partner at Wager Talk and get our special promo at wagertalk.com/chatsports. Get started for free and start making some money by betting on some NBA games today. So now, from a playoff team to a non-playoff team, the Miami Heat are going to have a pretty wild summer as well. They're obviously losing Dwayne Wade, who retired, and then Goran Dragic has a player option this summer, and Hassan Whiteside has a player option this summer, and then Udonis Haslem is an unrestricted free agent. He could be considering retirement at 39 years old, been with the team since he started. So, look, if Dragic and Whiteside opt in to their player options, they're going to be looking to unload those contracts somewhere. I don't know how they're going to get rid of either of those two. I think Dragic is going to be a lot easier to unload than Whiteside, but that's a lot of money tied up if those two guys opt in. But on the other hand, if they opt out, the Heat could be players in free agency. Obviously, Miami's kind of a destination in the NBA, so possibly could make a run at one of the big names. they haven't really been swirled around in any of the rumors for the KDs or the Kawhi or Kyrie Irvings, but maybe that next tier of guys like Kemba Walker and those kind of guys they could get into play for if Dragic and Whiteside choose not to pick up their player options, which I don't see happening. Now, the number one team in the NBA, record-wise, Milwaukee Bucks, have four pretty big free agents, but three major ones that I want to look at. And Chris Middleton, Malcolm Brogdon, and Brook Lopez. Chris Middleton has a player option that everyone expects him not to pick up because he could be a max-type guy. And then Malcolm Brogdon, the former Rookie of the Year, is entering restricted free agency. And then Brook Lopez, who had a breakout season from 3, is entering unrestricted free agency. So with the best record in the NBA, it wouldn't shock me for them to try to bring all these guys back, but I don't know if they're going to be able to. Obviously, like I said, Middleton's probably going to get a max. And then if Brogdon's restricted, there might be a team that overpays to keep Milwaukee from paying him. So it could come down to choosing between Malcolm Brogdon and Chris Middleton. So I wanted to compare these two guys. If they have to choose one or the other, in my opinion, I think Milwaukee has to pick Chris Middleton. He was an all-star for them. He was their second best scorer, probably their best defender on the team outside of Giannis. He could always defend the best player on the other team if you needed him to. It's going to be really hard to bring both back without having a terrible cap situation in Milwaukee. So if they choose one or the other, I predict they choose Chris Middleton this summer and let Malcolm Brogdon leave in restricted free agency. So New York, one of the biggest players in free agency this summer. Everyone's talking about him. Everyone's talking about them getting Kyrie, KD, Kawhi, Kemba Walker, whoever they want. Apparently, they're a target for. So you look at guys that are on their team right now that are entering free agency. Alonzo Trier has a team option, which I expect them to pick up after a pretty impressive rookie season after going undrafted. DeAndre Jordan's entering unrestricted free agency after being traded to New York from Dallas. And then Emmanuel Mudiay, who had a pretty good season as well, is entering restricted free agency. I don't see them trying to bring him back with Frank Ntilikina, Dennis Smith Jr., and then possibly one of these top-tier point guards going to New York either. So besides picking up Trier's option, I don't think they prioritize any of these guys. I think DeAndre Jordan could be a guy they bring back for some veteran help at the center position, especially if they bring in a top-tier free agent. Then DeAndre Jordan would make sense back in New York. So let's look at the three biggest names. The three biggest names that I think New York is going to have an actual shot at are Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving, and Kemba Walker. Now, Kemba Walker's kind of on the back burner, I think, for New York, because I think if they get KD, they're going to try to team him up with Kyrie. Or really, even if they don't get KD, they'll try to get Kyrie first anyway, because he is the better player than Kemba Walker. So they have a chance. They have a chance at two of the top, three guys entering free agency this summer. But the biggest thing, the number one thing they have that they know that they have locked up right now is a 14% chance at Zion Williamson and the number one pick. Now, think about that. That would be nuts. So you get two top-tier free agents and then you get Zion. Now, I don't think it's going to actually happen. There's been a lot of smoke being blown for the New York Knicks, but they have a chance. But let me know who you think the New York Knicks are going to end up with in free agency. Tell me if you think they're not going to land anybody, if you don't think they land any major free agents, or tell me if they land KD, Kyrie. Let me know in the comment section below who you think the New York Knicks are going to land in free agency this summer. Now we look at the Orlando Magic. Obviously made the playoffs. They made a pretty nice run in the regular season. They got three guys, two really major guys that are entering free agency in Nikola Vucevic and Terrence Ross. And then Michael Carter-Williams was a late season addition who had some pretty nice games for him. But all of them are entering unrestricted free agency. And with both Vucevic and Terrence Ross entering free agency, the Magic could potentially be losing two of their top four scorers. Now, if I had to make a prediction, I predict they're going to bring Vucevic back, who made the All-Star team, bring him back on a max contract, and then they let Terrence Ross go elsewhere. He had a really nice season off the bench at 15 points per game, and I think a playoff team could really use him as a scorer off the bench or even a starting two-guard, in my opinion. Now, like I said, this is rapid fire. So now, from Orlando, we're jumping over to Philadelphia. Obviously, still in the second round of the playoffs. They're kind of struggling just a little bit against the Toronto Raptors. Joel Embiid isn't having a great series, but one guy that is Jimmy Butler. He's having a great series, but he's entering free agency, has a player option. Nobody really expects him to opt into that. And then they also have Tobias Harris entering unrestricted free agency, and J.J. Redick, probably their best shooter on the team, been a sharpshooter for so long now, entering unrestricted free agency. Now, obviously they're going to be prioritizing Jimmy Butler and Tobias Harris over J.J. Redick, but it could come down to one or the other. So let's compare the two. I'll tell you who I think they should keep on the team, who they should prioritize. And honestly, if Jimmy Butler opts out of that player option like everyone expects him to, they have to prioritize him. He's one of the best two-way players in the league right now, and he really can do it all for them. I mean, he could be their best player. Joel Embiid is obviously their best player right now when he's healthy, but if he's not healthy, Jimmy Butler could easily be the best player on that Philadelphia team. Tobias Harris is a great player, great scorer. He was a great midseason addition for them. But Jimmy Butler's the better player, and if you have to choose one or the other, you got to take Jimmy Butler in this opinion. But here's one thing that I don't think people are considering. If they lose out on both of those guys, if they let Jimmy Butler and Tobias Harris walk, you could be starting the process all over again. You have a Joel Embiid who can't stay healthy, and then you have Ben Simmons who can't shoot at all, worth a lick. He can't shoot. So if those are your only two guys to build around, obviously I think Joel Embiid is one of the best players in the league when he's healthy. But if those are the only two guys they have coming back next season and they have no bench because they traded it away for Tobias and Jimmy Butler, you could be starting the process all over again. So you're going to have to bring back one or the other, or maybe both potentially. But if you have to choose one, you got to bring back Jimmy Butler. Now, Philadelphia's opponent in the second round, who I just mentioned, Toronto Raptors, that's the next team we're looking at. Everybody knows what this summer's about in Toronto. It's Kawhi Leonard, who has a player option. He won't pick that up. Marc Gasol also has a player option. And then Danny Green, who they also acquired in that Kawhi Leonard trade, will be entering unrestricted free agency. And like I said, this summer's all about Kawhi. And Toronto, I've talked about this before, Toronto feels good about bringing him back right now. And he's absolutely dominating these playoffs. He's probably the second best player in the playoffs right now, next to Kevin Durant. But it's probably the biggest summer in a long time for the Toronto Raptors franchise, because every star they've ever had in Toronto has either left or been traded. When you look at guys like Vince Carter, Tracy McGrady, Chris Bosh, they traded away DeMar DeRozan, who was an all-star. He wasn't quite on the superstar level. But that's four major guys that have left the Toronto franchise. So if they can't keep Kawhi, there's some problems going on in Toronto that they're going to have to address. So if they feel good about keeping him, great. I would love to see him stay. I really value these guys that value loyalty. Obviously, he wasn't loyal to the Spurs, whatever that whole situation was. But if he has a chance to be loyal to Toronto, I would love to see him stay there and keep building on this core that they have that's obviously making a deep run in the NBA playoffs. So now this last team, not a whole lot of intrigue in the free agent market for them, but the Washington Wizards, we look at three players that they have entering free agency. Bobby Portis is going to be restricted. Jabari Parker has a $20 million team option, which is just a horrendous contract, and I don't expect them to pick it up. And then Thomas Bryant, who had kind of a breakout season as a young center, is entering restricted free agency as well. So obviously, like I said, I think they will almost certainly decline this Jabari Parker $20 million player option. And I think Bobby Portis becomes an absolute priority for them. He had a really nice season after they traded for him by sending Otto Porter Jr. to the Chicago Bulls. But the biggest problem for them is that they have no cap space. Their money is locked up in an injured John Wall and a Jan Mahimi, who barely even plays anymore for the Washington Wizards. And then also Dwight Howard just picked up his player option. That's why I don't have him on this list. He'll also lock up a lot of their cap space. But you look at Bobby Portis, reportedly he turned down an extension from the Chicago Bulls, and he's looking to make almost $16 million this season. So can they even afford to bring him back? I don't know. It's going to be an interesting rebuilding time for the Wizards. They're going to be looking at the lottery. They have a pretty good chance at landing the number one pick, or at least in the top four of the NBA draft, and they'll look to build on John Wall, who's injured, Bradley Beal. That's about it. That's about all they got in Washington. So that wraps up all the players, all the teams, and each player that they have entering free agency on this edition of NBA Now. And to end the show, I want you guys to let me know who the biggest free agent in the East is going to change teams this summer. Let me know if it's Kawhi Leonard, Kemba Walker. Who do you think in the East is changing teams this summer? And like I said, guys, in the middle of our show, this show is sponsored by Wager Talk. Go get started today at wagertalk.com/chatsports. Make sure you're following me on Twitter at JimmyCrowther3 or at all_things_Mavs, and I'll be keeping you updated all playoffs and all off-season long. Thank you, and I'll see you next time.